All right, welcome back to the channel. So, Shawn Porter called out Terence Crawford, and Errol Spence Jr.'s coach, Derek James, said Shawn Porter can beat Terence Crawford and talks about a little about why that is. And let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel, man. I get to talk about a subject that is happy, that I like to talk about, and that is Derek James. And Errol Spence Jr.'s excellent trainer was on a show called Money Brown TV. If you guys don't know about it, go check out Money Brown TV. There's a great interview up there with Derek James. I came to the channel. Other people, BFTB came to the channel. There were other guys on there that are regular on there. Great interview, late night, midnight type of interview with Derek James. He gave a lot of time to the questions. Just, man, really, really, really loved it, dude. And one of the things that came out of this was a question that I had asked Derek about, or no, not I, somebody else asked Derek James about Shawn Porter and Terence Crawford and whether the fight could get, how he thought the fight would get made. And of course, he's giving his opinion, right? His opinion as the trainer of Errol Spence, but Errol Spence Jr. is the boss and the people above him are the bosses, right? All that good old stuff. However, he gives some really good insight into or confirmation on some things that I, general ideas that I had thought. So first things first, Terence, his opinion on whether or not, Terence Crawford or Shawn Porter would be a tough fight for Terence Crawford. And he's like, look, man, yeah, all of these top guys, and this is the thing that he kind of went through, was that, look, when you're fighting top guys, you're always sharp. You have to be sharp because everybody has roughly the same amount of, and I'm paraphrasing here, right? All the top fighters, they have roughly the same athleticism. They're high level athletes. They have high level skills, right? But when you're fighting lower level competition, you can have a guy that has excellent skill, but he just doesn't have the physical ability. He's just not as gifted an athlete as, somebody else. So if the skill is equal, but one is just an exceptional athlete, then the exceptional athlete is going to win. So where you have, and so in the case with Terence Crawford, that is something that, that I've been saying for a while and I think is really true, but also why it's very important for Shawn Porter to, for Terence Crawford to fight Shawn Porter. Now, one of the conversations we had was about like what the likelihood of the fight between Errol Spence Jr. And actually, before I get on that, because that's a little bit of a segue, and as you guys know, I do this stuff off my head. I have a little bit of an outline, but sometimes my thoughts skip from here to there. But as far as like the ability for Shawn Porter to beat Terence Crawford, see that Shawn Porter is the level of athlete. He is the same, if he's not at the exact same level of athlete as Terence Crawford, he is very, very, very athletic, very quick, very strong, very smart, right? Much better athlete than any of the other guys that Errol Spence, that Terence Crawford has fought to date. So where you have, things that Terence Crawford could get away with against the Aegis Kalvanakis, or things he could get away with against, Mir Khan, and he won't be able to get away with Shawn Porter. And so he is going to have to show things that he has not had to show yet, like grit, like really like being say like Terence Crawford has never been in a situation where he might have got dogged for 2 rounds, right? Where it's like, man, this dude, he's doing something I can't figure it out. Like, for example, like what was happening with Jamal Charlo when he fought Matt Korobov, right? Where it was a southpaw counterpuncher, and he just kept countering. He being Korobov just kept countering Jamal Charlo with the left, right? But eventually Jamal Charlo was like, okay, he figured it out. He made the adjustment, and he, and then he prevailed, not through a knockout. But, Matt Korobov was a higher level guy that never really got a shot, but, Jamal could make that adjustment. And I think Matt Korobov is a pretty good athlete too. But that is not something that, or better yet, way better than Matt Korobov is Jermell Charlo and Tony Harrison. That's a better example because Matt Korobov was, he's not a stellar athlete like Jamal, so he probably could get away with a little bit more against a Korobov. But say, for example, like a Jermell Charlo fighting Tony Harrison, those guys are evenly matched. So, Jermell just couldn't run in there and just get the dude out of there because of the skill level of Tony Harrison and the athleticism of Tony Harrison. So he had to overcome it. He, had to overcome it, figure a different way, and get to get the knockout at that level. Since Terence isn't fighting people at that level, when he jumps up, you just don't know what's going to happen. And I think that is one of the reasons why he wants to go straight to, and there's media push to get Terence Crawford to go right to Errol Spence Jr. Because if you go right to Errol Spence Jr. and you lose, well, hey, man, you've made all the money. You made the big pay-per-view thing. But in the meantime, you're going to keep fighting guy after guy that people don't want to see you fight. And so, for example, right now, the two most likely fights for Terence Crawford next are Igis Kalvanakis rematch and Kell Brook. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're not Kell Brook. I'm not gonna jump on the fight because like I said to shout out to Town Biz on his channel. Because hey, dude, big defenders of Terence Crawford told me, like, look, man, at the point you're saying that he should fight Shawn Porter, if he fights Kell Brook, he should fight Kell Brook. If he winds up fighting Kell Brook, don't turn around and say that that's not an acceptable fight. So I'm going to stay consistent, and I do believe that that's an acceptable fight, but it really is just like an acceptable filler fight, right? It's not something that is going to say, it's somebody we know have skills, but we also know he has a lot of wear and tear on him, but it's better than nothing, right? But Igis Kalvanakis, a guy that he just knocked out, don't be surprised if you see him go back in there, because Top Rank, they're stable, and the welterweights is just so thin, man. But I'm hoping this fight can get made. Oh, and the other thing that was the second part of it. I went in asking the question about Shawn Porter specifically. I was like, look, man, doesn't it make sense for Terence Crawford to fight Shawn Porter and try to beat Shawn Porter, so that he can make sure that he's ahead of Shawn Porter in line to get an Errol Spence Jr. fight? Because if you look at it, and Derek James agreed. He's like, that's about right. They probably would push us to fight Shawn Porter. They probably do want us to fight Shawn Porter. And the reason that I said it, and the observation that I made, was that Shawn Porter's both the WBO mandatory, the WBO number one, not the mandatory. And I'm okay with no disrespect to anybody that wants to characterize mandatory and number one as if it's the same thing. It's not, but whatever. Maybe it's just, people just use it the same way and they mean the same thing. I don't know why people keep calling it that. Whatever. He's number one in the WBO and number one in the WBC. So he's in position to be either guy's mandatory. The WBO could force a mandatory against Terence Crawford for Shawn Porter. Like, Shawn Porter could petition for them to get the mandatory and do whatever they got to do and force the fight that way. And Shawn Porter said in an interview that he would be willing to do that. However, Shawn Porter is also the WBC number one position, which means he could be the mandatory for Errol Spence, and which is more attractive to the PBC and to Fox, a sure thing or something you don't know about, right? The sure thing is Shawn Porter. We know they know that fight's going to sell because it sold last time, and there's anticipation because there was doubt about the outcome. So there's not just the Danny Garcia fight, which is a mandatory defense, right? Is mandatory for his WBC. There's also the next WBC mandatory, and there's the IBF mandatory, which is Abu Karev versus Sergey Lipinets, which is another fight that's going to be made and going to be mandated because it has been a year since it's been a year, over a year since Errol Spence Jr. defended his IBF belt against a mandatory in Carlos Ocampo. So his IBF mandatory is coming up next. So when Derek James is like, look, for two reasons it makes sense for Terence Crawford to take the Shawn Porter fight. One, just to up your level of competition before you come near Errol Spence. Because Errol Spence, that Shawn and Errol are Errol's a better fighter than Shawn, but it's like here. It ain't like this. It's like this. It's not like that, right? So anyway, we'll see if he takes it. I hope he takes it. I don't think he will because, quite honestly, I don't think he has the ability to. Like, it's just going to start calling it like it is, man. A lot of these dudes are acting like these people are bosses, and they're not bosses. They may be, they may be bosses of the people that work for them, but they've got a boss. You know what I mean? So you may be a boss, but you a servant too. You know what I mean? So Terence Crawford, yeah, he may have he's a boss and that he's got people working around him and people that are in his employ. But when it comes to top rank, dude, nah, man, you're an employee. You know what I mean? You're an employee. You may not think you're an employee, but functionally speaking, de facto, you're an employee. And, de facto is just, not actually, not by the strict definition of the thing, are you an employee? But in the way that it works, it's a distinction without a difference. So will he fight Shawn Porter? Probably not. Should he fight Shawn Porter? Yes, he should. Could he lose to Shawn Porter? Absolutely. Right? All of those good things, man. So anyway, you let me know what you think in the comment section. And I want to be sure that, like, everything that I said in this video, this is my opinion. This is you. Please go to Money Brown's video. Go check out the video so you can see it for yourself and see the interview for yourself. If you take his content, credit him for his content. And with that, I'm out. Peace. All right. Welcome back to the chat. So, Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury is set for December. Yeah, sure it is. And, says Bob Arum, and to boot, Deontay Wilder makes spectacular accusations. Spectacular accusations being made of Deontay Wilder firing members of his camp because they poisoned his water. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. So in this video, we're going to talk about a couple things. We're going to talk about Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury and the fact that Bob Arum says that he believes this fight is going to be kicked off. It's going to take place in December. And then the second thing that we're going to talk about is the notion that Deontay Wilder fired somebody from his camp because they poisoned his water. Let's talk about those two things, man. People are wild. Okay, first things first. Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury happened in December in Vegas. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Because it's a big breakout and it would be like what? Like the fifth pay-per-view or like the fourth pay-per-view that PBC is going to be trying to get people to buy in a fight against Tyson Fury that nobody's interested in. I think you would be much smarter to wait until either you can have that fight in front of an audience, and I think that that's what they're smart enough to do, but they want to keep Tyson Fury's name in the press because nobody's interested in Tyson Fury. Literally, not of all the topics that I talk about, of all the fighters that I talk about, top fighters. I'm not talking about like a video about Mark Magsayo, if I would do that, which I'm not. I would love to be able to do it, but I'm just not. You know what I mean? Because I'm not inviting the type of people that would love Mark Magsayo videos to my page so that they can try to destroy other fighters and think, oh, you're cool with Mark Magsayo, man, whatever. But you get my point, dude. Anyway, nah, man. Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, in order to get the type of money these dudes want to get, need to be in front of an audience. I do not think that it is. I do not believe that this is going to be made. I just think this is a way to continue to try to put Tyson Fury's name in the press. That's it. If you go through like News Now or and you research, because this is how I look for trends in articles. So not just reading one article. I'm looking at like, okay, this article made this point. How many other boxing pages, like articles or tweets, go have the same message being delivered right around the same time, right? So you do that, and I try to do that in order to recognize media campaigns. So like right now, you got a couple organized media campaigns. One organized media campaign is the discrediting of Gary Russell Jr., right? Because despite the fact that everything about Gary Russell Jr. and what he's been saying about the fight is completely open for everybody to see, somehow there's an orchestrated group of internet pages that just keep pushing that he's ducking Devin Haney. So it's clear that that is the message that they want to have out there about Gary Russell Jr. That is an organized media campaign. Tyson Fury, you can see the same thing in the UK where they had organized media campaigns. They have him somebody ghost writes him a book. He's making TV appearances in these wrestling matches and cooking shows and things like that to keep his name relevant, to get people interested in him who aren't necessarily interested in boxing on a day-to-day basis, all that type of stuff. But the problem is that Tyson Fury's reputation is so damaged that it's not going to do any good. And let me tell you, it's done. I mean, his reputation as a cheater in the United States is set, and I can prove it because I had somebody walk up to me and say, hey, man, like my son said it. In fact, it was my son. He said, Dad, there were two kids. And I hope you guys watch this video, two kids, two 14-year-old boys who are on the internet. Now my son knows boxing, right? Knows about it, but he doesn't sit there and he's not looking at it all day. He knows about boxing, what he hears out of this room, right? Or what hears me on the phone, or when I sit down to watch a fight. Sometimes he'll watch a fight with me. But he's not watching it like he's watching basketball and all that. So he walks up to me and he says, hey, Dad, did Tyson Fury cheat against Deontay Wilder? And I said, yeah, he cheated. He was like, and then the other kid looked at my son and said, yeah, he cheated. Two 14-year-old boys. I also went out to a bar this weekend and I did this, and I was sitting there, and I'm in Texas with a dude that knows boxing. And I'd never met him before, right? He didn't know I had a channel, but he knew who all the fighters were. A Mexican dude, not somebody that is not a black dude. I asked him. Somebody asked me. Again, it's like, man, what do you think about Tyson Fury? And I was like, look, man, Tyson Fury is a great fighter, whatever. He's a good fighter, but he cheated. And the Mexican dude looked at me. He's like, yeah, he cheated. He's like, yeah, he beat Deontay Wilder, but he cheated. He was like, yeah, I saw the gloves. He's like, and then my son said, right? My son was like, explain to me how he cheated. He was like, look, yeah, he's like, Dad, because I saw this. There was a video where somebody demonstrated it, right? But it wasn't connected to Tyson Fury. Somebody put a video out where they did what Tyson Fury did in a glove with the fight with somebody, and then explained it that that's what he was doing. People saw it. So now my son knows that is a cheating technique in boxing. My son, a 14-year-old, and my son's friend, a 14-year-old who don't watch boxing, and a Mexican guy that I just walked to because he owns a crawfish boil. He owns a crawfish place. Other Mexican dude that I talked to, the day something don't look right. So Tyson Fury's reputation, dude, is just taking such a tremendous hit in the United States. So no, I don't believe that fight. And the second part of it, because I'm going to roll this down, a little bit quicker, man, is that, yeah, man. No, I'm not going to go any further on that, man. Just understand this, dude. They're trying to push Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder will probably not be made in December. And when it does get made if it did get made in December, dude, just be real careful, dude, about how you think this fight is going to play out in the public, because Tyson Fury's name really, really is mud in the United States. That's the reaction of Tyson Fury on the street. So anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section. With that, I'm out. Peace.